Non-Americans of Reddit who visited the United States, what was the weirdest or shocking thing you saw? Your news. It's over sensationalized. I couldn't believe it when I visited. Every news program seems much less like news and more like reality TV. It seems like it's very hard for you to get unbiased information and that there's an information overload. Also, all the news are only about the US. There's a whole world out there. An American here to say you are 100% correct. And there are people who still think the news is actually the news and reporting facts. Backwoods northern Wisconsin gas station with big fence on which was painted in enormous letters. Chainsaws. Cheese. Guns. Also the big yellow signs on 41 that just say cheese wine fudge. Or the sign on 41 that has a religious thing on one side and an ad for a strip club on the other. Just the scale of things. Everything seems to be supersized. Also the huge distances between places. Tucson to Las Vegas might not look so far away when looking at a map, but they are over 600 kilometers apart. That's almost equal to crossing my entire home country. Distance driving is one thing I have always found interesting as a difference between America and Europe. Anything less than 6 hours isn't even really a road trip in the States. It might just be for a quick weekend trip somewhere. Not shocking. But I found American commercials extremely condescending. And lots of ads for random medications. The only ones I see at home are for generic things like colds and hay fever. Did a road trip from LA to San Francisco. The homelessness in California shocked me. Completely shocked me. When in LA our hotel was in Santa Monica and in the evening it was swamped with homeless people. Santa Monica is called the home of the homeless. It literally has that name from I think Harry Shearer's, from The Simpsons, etc. Radio show since the 80s. And San Francisco keeps getting worse. It is really sad. There is a major lack of affordable housing. Honestly, I was shocked at the size of portions at fast food outlets. If you have Netflix, there's a great show called History 101 that talks about the fast food industry in the United States. It's really interesting and informative. In Washington, D.C., dozens of homeless, several of them ex-military, just streets away from the White House and Congress. D.C. is a dump. And our government only pretends to care about veterans if they can use them for virtue signaling. The tipping system plus tax not included in the prices. Not criticizing the US system. That's their thing. It's just hard to math sometimes. I am criticizing it though. It is incredibly annoying that I don't know how much something is until I have to pay. And tipping culture is f***ing ridiculous. Just include the tip in the bill so I don't have to sit there and pay the waiter's wage out of some fake generosity. One of my friends visits Florida about once a year and he says the strangest thing is that it's full of either super fat or super fit, as in healthy, muscular, etc., with little in between. That's more and more just the US. It's a nation of extremes. Doesn't matter what it is. It must be taken well beyond any logical endpoint. Generally to be expected from a nation where average is an insult. I'm Canadian and took a road trip to Philadelphia a few years ago. Two things that stood out. 1. Giant Christian anti-abortion billboards beside the highway. I wish I could remember exactly what they said, but I remember the wording was aggressive. Like how the FCK is that a billboard on the highway aggressive. And 2. The overwhelming number of American flags. Flags everywhere. On storefronts. On lawns. All over public property. On people's cars. So many flags. It was all very "you're in America and don't you goddamn forget IT." Double quote. The TV show To Catch a Predator. There must have been some sort of marathon of it. Because I remember my whole family watching it. Jaws dropped. For hours. Reality TV is, in fact, f***ing bizarre. I think people like seeing how bad folks can be and then watch them get brought to justice. Or at least told they were. A stranger looking at me when I was using the toilet. Why such big gaps between the stall doors? Might as well include a viewing platform and binoculars too. I was 16 in Vegas and was walking around at night when I encountered a person with a Mickey Mouse mascot head on, laying on the ground passed out with beer bottles in each hand. Oh boy. I've never been to America, but I was on holiday in Jamaica. One of our excursions got cancelled due to weather and we were booked with a bus full of Americans. Now I don't know if you've been on holiday or not and gone on trips out, but with fellow Brits, we tend to keep ourselves to ourselves with the odd conversation with each other, but with the Americans, they were so loud and boisterous. But it was awesome. The trip we went on was one of the best. All the Americans were having banter with each other about what state they're from. They all got really drunk and even louder throughout the day. On our way back to the hotel, the whole bus was chanting the driver's name just for shits and gigs. I will never forget that day. I met a guy in Harlem who asked if he could borrow $50,000. Well, did you lend him the money? That handicapped people live on the street if they have nobody who is looking for them. It's also illegal for disabled people receiving government help to have more than $2,000 in the bank at any given time. When paying cash, people scribbling on the notes with a pen to find out if it was fake or not. US must have an awful lot of fake cash, or the marketing of the cash pen company must be really good. I can confirm that. I used to work fast food, and if you had a $100 bill we had to mark it with a special marker to see if it was fake. It sucked because some customers were only getting $5 worth of food. I always tell people don't use a $100 bill unless it's necessary. Medication being advertised on TV. Crazy. Yep. We think it is FCAD up too. It is Big Pharma pushing this. People shouldn't be asking doctors for specific medications like the commercials want you to. Doctors should be deciding what you need. Of course. Many doctors are in the pocket of Big Pharma. The cubic ton of ice in the drinks. I don't care if I get less beverage, I want my goddamn drink to remind me of the glaciers. Pink firearms. I'm not used to seeing any kind of gun, but someone apparently decided to make guns and market them specifically to girls. Only worth buying if the bullets are also pink. There are vast stretches of absolutely nothing, plus cows, between major cities. And corn. I love Coca-Cola and went to buy a bottle at a store, but what I got was the most disgusting oversweetened drink ever. It's insane how sweet it tastes. That's the high fructose corn syrup being used instead of real sugar. There's a reason Mexican Coke is a thing. Pro tip for Americans near the Canadian border. Canadian Coke uses real sugar as well. Please wait for the border to open. I was there for a student exchange some years ago and I was pretty weirded out by the Pledge of Allegiance. Nobody told me you guys do that. So when on my first day everyone suddenly stood up and started reciting some stuff to a flag, I briefly wondered if my organization left me in the hands of some cult school mayo. It first originated as a Cold War thing. Basically they'd make kids pledge their allegiance to the United States. It just stuck after that. Though you don't have to do it and usually don't really in high school. The most shocking thing was that everything was normal. People were really nice. Food was amazing. We had a great time. The cities on the east and west coast all felt very safe. I was more shocked that it wasn't weird, if anything. Goes to show how much the media amplifies the 1% of craziness. Most people are just going about their business enjoying their lives. You take 5 minutes reading the news and you think the whole country is on fire 24/7. I found the poverty pretty difficult to get my head around. I was staying at a hostel in Hawaii and one night the conversation with my EU roommates was about traveling and they couldn't wrap their head around why I couldn't afford to go backpacking in Europe for 6 months. Every 200 meters, even in the middle of nowhere, you have a fucking fast food restaurant. I really enjoyed it. Though, it's not a proper road trip if you don't have some crappy fast food in the middle of nowhere. It was two things. 1. People sit besides each other on trains and buses. I am Swedish. And 2. The sheer amount of homeless people. Fat people. Drugs in store. Big road everywhere in middle of cities. Size of McDonald's meal. Comma. Guns. People cheering you like you saved their life. Size of some cars. I strongly think the U.S. is a great country. But some stuff are just strangers for a European. The guns part throws many of the foreigners off. Especially when they see ordinary citizens with an arsenal of handguns. Semi-autos. And sometimes full autos with the ability to carry semi-auto pistols down the street without breaking the law. Not many visitors where I live. But those who come for family are surprised by how easy it is buy, transport, and sell guns ammo in certain jurisdictions. When I first arrived here, the most noticeable thing was the size of one person's small pho noodle soup was the size of my whole family's dinner soup back home. Pho portions in the US are ridiculous. Even as an American, used to the large portion sizes of food. Many pho restaurants serve up big gulp quantities for some reason. A young girl beckoning her almost spherical dog with sea-meerbud a nugget said with an appropriately strong accent. Absolutely flawless American experience. Flags. F-king everywhere. Like on every lamppost. Like WTF, is this a country or some kind of cult? It's worse on a holiday weekend. Public toilets. Like. Why is it necessary to have massive gap in your door so people can watch you pee? And why is the water level so high? Are Americans all voyeurs who get off on people's toilet habit? It is so you don't have enough real privacy to have sex in the stall. Or jerk off. Or shoot up. So get to poop in and get out. Before someone eyeballs the crack and your crack. The amount of poverty in the US is shocking if you buy into the shiny Disney facade it can present. I've seen starving people queuing for food in a bunch of different countries. But the longest queue I ever saw was in Portland. Or, that kind of blew my mind. For a country which is supposedly the richest and most successful in all of history, it sure has left a lot of folks behind. Someone asked me if in Spain we have internet. American media presents the rest of the world as inferior and lacking in the basics. My mother and her side of the family all believe the rest of the world is communist, socialist, and all their societies are in the midst of collapse. It really is sad. Edit. To be clear, I call it communist socialist in regards to my family because they cannot distinguish one from the other and do not understand that certain forms of socialism, such as medicine, are good for you. Once they learn we're Australian, it's all G'day mate and put another shrimp on the barbie. Can't even say G'day right and we don't F-king call them shrimp. They're prawns. All the rest of the Yanks are alright. I heard an Australian comedian Will Anderson put it best. In America you learn 3 references about a country and say, that'll do. Thank you for Tim Tams by the way. The lady saying you and your migrant girlfriend should go back to Mexico. Trump doesn't want you here. Double quote. This really confused me and my sister who were speaking in French to each other. It kinda weirds me out that Americans don't know what cordial squash is. Also, cops sat in a McDonald's with guns on. That is not something you would really see here. Cops are only ever really armed if there's been a terror attack, so they don't tend to be mooching around McDonald's. I'm from Belgium and visited my brother who did an internship in America. His boss told us some things to visit while we were there and he always told us it wasn't a long drive. Every F-king time we had to drive 3 hours. If you drive that long in Belgium, you're on the other side of the country. The military precision of ordering and picking up and where to do either in a coffee shop. We take your money here. And you wait like a good boy over there. Okay. Thanks. Overweight people and big, loud cars. The parks are amazing though. For a country with so much obesity, I expected the food to be good. It was not. It was poor. Like huge portions of barely seasoned fake product. Also, the price of actual, real food in the grocery stores was so high. Like to eat normally is significantly more expensive than fast food. When I moved from Germany to the USA, the most shocking thing I saw was An Aldi store. Of all the stores that I know from Germany, the last one I would expect to be here in Ohio would be that one. Next in line would be the almost competitive nature of religiousness in the USA. It seems less about believing in something and more about making sure everyone around you knows that you believe in something and they'd better praise you for it. The water level in the toilet was always disconcerting. Tipping when they circle what 15, 18 and 20% of the bill is at the bottom. Very passive aggressive. From Ireland. Went to New Orleans. Checked into a hotel. The receptionist drew on a map then handed it to us. If you stay within this area, you'll be safe. What? I went to New Orleans. I was surprised by how quick it becomes a bad neighborhood. Like, 1 minute you're at a Mardi Gras parade and the other you got a shady dude trying to sell you his mixtape. When my dad told him no. He was more insistent and threatening, but my brother went to get him. My dad was a bit behind us and said firmly, hey, we're not interested or something along those lines. Apart from the usual things, why so many guns? The biggest thing was how far away everything is from everything else. In most European ports you can walk off the ship and the shops and cafes are right there. In most US ports, bar San Diego and some of the smaller ports in Alaska, you need to take a taxi to a mall. And again, a lot of places have no discernible city center. Also, the lack of takeaway food is weird. In the UK you can find fish and chips, Chinese and Indian takeaways pretty much everywhere. They don't seem as common in the US. I'm a Canadian who's been down to the deep south and Chicago a few times. The racial segregation in cities is a whole different world to me. You go from one area of town where everyone is white, pass over a certain street, and suddenly everyone is black. Also, the amount of abandoned businesses, particularly in small towns. There's occasional vacant lots where I'm from, and maybe a rundown vacant building here and there. But it seems 20 times more common in the US. Meth heads. Saw one smoking a pipe while shitting in the street at 9 PM in Tenderloin, San Francisco. They'll stop you at traffic lights and try to get in your car, offer you meth and aggressively ask you for money. In the UK we have more sedated spice heads that'll ask you for 31p for a bus that doesn't exist and wish you a good day when you don't have cash. The gap in the public toilet doors. This is so bizarre to me. And creepy. Seriously the most uncomfortable pee in my life. If it makes you feel any better, we're not watching you or anybody else. It doesn't bother us and we honestly don't even notice or look through the cracks because we're used to them. Fast food employee asking for your name at the counter and yelling it afterwards so you can pick it up. My 16-year-old self and my friends had a blast saying crazy names to employees and have them yell it out loud. The lack of public bathrooms in New York was a surprise. They're really rare compared to in most major cities in the world. Obesity. Homeless people. Begging people who may or may not be homeless. Begging people who use their kids as props who look like they made more money in an hour than most. Begging people who hang outside of Disneyland etc. Using their kids as props. May or may not be homeless. Tipping. The price is never the price. Grossly oversized meals. Fat people with a large cup in their hand at all times. I'm assuming filled with soft drink. Scooters. So many people on scooters who promptly hop off when they get to their destination. Motels. We stayed at one just off of International Drive in Florida and it was one of the most jaw-dropping experiences of my life. Hookers. Pimps and raccoons everywhere. It was like a scene from the start of CSI. An interesting way to start a family holiday. Ridiculously large portions of everything. Black people hang out on the sidewalk in a big city all day and asking me for $1. At the same time white runners did exercise. I know a lot of people from overseas and surprisingly not read observations that I've heard multiple times from people. I've read all of the responses and yours is the only one that isn't a trope from Reddit. A real observation. Breakfast in hotels. Everything was packed in plastic and it all tasted like cardboard. That you can go through a red light if you're turning right. When I first caught a taxi in Texas, I was utterly shocked when the driver drove through a red light. Also 4-way stop signs. I don't recall seeing any of those in Australia. I'm from Mexico. There was no trash on the street. The roads were amazing and the streets had no holes on the pavement. And people were so nice to pedestrians. We went to San Antonio for a week and we didn't have issues with racists and practically everyone spoke Spanish. We drove into a nice neighborhood just to see, and there was a huge house on corner that was abandoned. Just like in movies, it looked like the haunted house of the neighborhood. Lovely holiday. I want to go back. Edit. A word. Maybe not the weirdest thing ever, but stopping in grocery stores in a small towns in upper New York State. I remember being through Alexandria Bay on a couple of occasions. On that particular trip they all had huge sections dedicated to various forms of processed cheese. Cheese in cans. Cheese in jars. Cheese in boxes. Cheese in plastic wrappers. At least half an aisle in most of the stores I visited was processed cheese. I had no idea that such variety existed nor that there were so many manufacturers. It only made me a bit sad because the selection of actual cheese in the cooler by the deli counter was so small. I don't know if this is an everywhere in America thing. I don't recall seeing this in Palo Alto, for instance. Close bracket.